Have you ever wondered why the teachings of great minds still baffle us after thousands of years? We seem to know Socrates, Seneca, or Confucius by heart through the worn pages of books. But between those familiar words, there is always a gap that is hard to name. The gap of lost sayings, of truncated copies, of translations that have drifted away with the prejudices of the times. Perhaps it is in that gap that the most important secrets are hidden. Imagine a seemingly gentle saying that was once considered dangerous, a seemingly simple piece of advice that is actually a bitter medicine against illusion, a proposition that we thought we understood that turns out to be just a shadow of the original meaning. If what we know is only the polished surface, and the core, the spirit, the intention, the context, drifts somewhere between time and interpretation, then what is left behind? This video is not about collecting more famous quotes. We will go against the wind, following the traces of persistent misunderstandings, blurred fragments, to look back at the ideas that have nourished humanity with more sober eyes. Because the echoes of philosophy not only remind us, they also force us to doubt, to compare and listen to things that have never been fully said. And who knows, when we are willing to listen to the last sediment, the most secret thing is not the lost words, but the attitude of uncompromising pursuit of truth, something that every age needs. To embark on the journey to discover the secrets hidden by time, we need to return to three central figures, three intellectual figures whose echoes still resonate in the spiritual life of humanity, even after thousands of years. Socrates, an Athenian citizen who did not write anything, but shook the ancient democracy with the art of questioning. He left no books behind, only memories in the stories of his disciples, such as Plato or Xenophon. Therefore, Socrates is always like a character hidden in the mist, which are his words, which are the interpretations of his students. Until now, it is still unclear. Athens was the center of knowledge at that time, but also the place where his questions became a threat and eventually led to his death sentence by poison. Seneca, a Roman philosopher of the Stoic school, lived amid the luxury and violence of Nero's empire. He is famous for his letters to friends, pages about the brevity of life, about spiritual freedom even in prison. However, some of those letters have been lost, and what remains shows a complex picture, a sage writing about asceticism, but in the midst of a powerful court. Confucius, the Eastern master, left the Analects as the moral and educational foundation for generations of East Asians. However, the book was not written by him, but was copied by his students over many centuries. Editing, arranging, even cutting caused the teachings to sometimes change according to the will of each era, to serve a certain political order. Three people, three contexts: a controversial Athens, a powerful Rome, a chaotic China in the spring and autumn period. They not only lived in history, they also lived in the way posterity told them. And it is there that the secrets begin to arise. Not because they are silent, but because time and people have changed the original voice into a distant echo, difficult to distinguish what is real and what is fake. When we think of great philosophers, we often think that they left behind a complete treasure trove of ideas, but the truth is quite different. In fact, important parts of their legacy have been lost, cut off, or misinterpreted over the generations. It is here that we encounter the first paradox. We study philosophy to find truth, but from the very starting point, that truth is an incomplete puzzle. Let's start with Socrates. He never wrote a book. The entire image of him exists in the dialogues recorded by Plato and in a few memoirs by Xenophon. But Plato had his own purpose, to build his own system of ideas. So what we know of Socrates is really Socrates, or just a shadow through the stories of his students. Perhaps there were questions, thoughts that were ignored, even changed to serve Plato's philosophical system. Socrates, the philosopher of questioning, suddenly became a legend whose truth we never know. As for Seneca, his legacy is deeply flawed. His philosophical letters to Lucilius were once a source of light for Stoic thought, but not all of them survive. Some have been lost, some are only repeated in later manuscripts, and there are passages that are suspected of being embellished. Seneca is often seen as a hypocrite, preaching asceticism but living in luxury. But what is missing in the letters that have disappeared? Perhaps they contain explanations, inner struggles that, if read, would completely change how we see him. Confucius is no exception. What we know of him comes mainly from the Analects, a collection of his teachings recorded by generations of students. But scholars point out that this work has undergone many revisions. Some of the dogmatic phrases may not reflect Confucius's original intentions, but rather are products of the political context that sought to use his image to consolidate power. For example, passages emphasizing absolute obedience to superiors may have been added to legitimize the feudal order, rather than the master's original intentions. And so all three philosophers faced the same fate. Their legacy was lost, distorted, or even exploited. Later generations approached them through opaque lenses. This is the first incident, the great paradox. We seek truth through their words, but the truth has been corrupted by time and people. So are we learning philosophy from the philosophers, or just from the stories told about them? When we look deeper into the journeys of the three sages, we encounter a strange paradox. It is precisely what was misunderstood, criticized, or considered defective that has allowed their ideas to survive through the millennia. What seemed to be lost or distorted has become the factor that has helped philosophy spread, survive, and be debated until today. Let us return to Socrates. In Athens, he was considered a troublemaker, a corrupter of the morals of the youth. He was brought to court, sentenced to death, and forced to drink poison. In the eyes of the people at that time, that death was a humiliating end. But in history, that very sentence was the milestone that made Socrates an immortal symbol of the spirit of the pursuit of truth. If he had not been condemned, if he had been just an unknown teacher in the streets of Athens, would posterity still mention his name so much? The paradox is, suppression has immortalized his ideas. The same goes for Seneca. He was seen as a hypocrite, preaching simplicity but living in luxury in the court of Nero. This image has been doubted for centuries. But it is this contradiction that makes Stoic philosophy closer to real people. Because Seneca's life reflects a truth: no one is perfect, not even the master. He both yearns for spiritual purity and is bound by political power, and it is this conflict that makes his writings so powerful. Readers see in Seneca not a distant saint, but a weak human being, like themselves. What is considered a weakness turns out to be the greatest strength. As for Confucius, centuries later, he was associated with the image of the guardian of the feudal order, a symbol of blind obedience. But when we dig deeper into the original, we see that he emphasized self-cultivation, cultivating personal morality before governing others. If some sentences in the Analects were added to consolidate power, then those controversial passages opened up hundreds of academic debates from east to west. Thanks to that, Confucius's thoughts were constantly reread, retranslated, and redebated. And thanks to that, his core spirit still found a way to resonate through many layers of time. The general paradox appears. Misunderstandings, harsh judgments, even distortions, instead of burying the legacy, make that legacy constantly be illuminated, discussed, and live forever. If their thoughts were only preserved intact, perhaps they would have remained in books, with few people touching them. But it is because of the ambiguities, the debates, that we continue to return to them, to search, to doubt, to dialogue. So, what the ancients considered a tragedy, later generations recognize as an opportunity. The death of Socrates, the contradictions of Seneca, the misunderstandings surrounding Confucius. All these seemingly destructive events were fertile grounds for philosophy to flourish and endure. This is the paradox of reversal. What was considered bad becomes good. What was considered wrong becomes a door to deeper layers of meaning. Here, the journey to find lost secrets and reversed paradoxes has brought us to the deepest level. It is the interweaving of loss and misunderstanding that opens up timeless philosophical rays of light. The climax lies not in a dramatic event, but in the realization that these three great minds left not only words, but also an attitude towards life. An attitude that, to this day, we still have not fully understood. Socrates, in his final moments when he lifted the cup of poison, did not cry or complain. He talked with his students, discussed the soul and immortality, and then calmly entered death. The famous saying, "I only know that I know nothing," is often seen as self-deprecation, but hidden behind it is a courage, daring to admit the limits of knowledge, to fight against the illusion that he has understood the world. In an age when everyone believes he has the truth, Socrates' words are the antidote to intellectual arrogance. His death, which seemed tragic, turned out to be an immortal declaration. Truth never belongs to those who remain silent in the face of falsehood. Seneca, when ordered to commit suicide by Emperor Nero, did not beg or be angry. He wrote about death as a natural part of life, a release from suffering. For him, what was scary was not death, but living a meaningless life. We do not have little time, but we waste too much. That saying, after 2,000 years, still resonates in every era. Because people today are also absorbed in countless frivolous things, then lament that life is too short. Seneca shows us the brevity is not of life, but of the way we live. Confucius, in simple but profound words, emphasized that social order begins with self-cultivation. He did not teach blind obedience, but taught people to train themselves to become the roots of a healthy community. The gentleman seeks from himself, the petty man seeks from others. This sentence, which seems to be just moral advice, is actually a secret of inner strength. Only when we know that responsibility lies within ourselves can we escape dependence on circumstances. Although the Analects has been edited many times, that spirit still penetrates every page. Nothing can obscure it. The climax is here. We realize that what lasts is not the integrity of the text, but the strong vitality of the spirit of pursuing truth, of calmness in the face of adversity, of the belief that true knowledge lies in self-cultivation. Each philosopher, through his own tragedies, has demonstrated that strength. Socrates chose death to preserve the truth. Seneca chose death to preserve freedom. Confucius chose patience to sow seeds for thousands of generations. And as a natural consequence, we understand that lost secrets, misunderstood words, cannot extinguish their echoes. On the contrary, it is the gap, the ambiguity, that makes us constantly return, search, debate, and thereby nurture an endless stream of philosophy. Perhaps this is the greatest legacy they left. Not a closed system of dogma, but an always open door, inviting us to enter the endless journey of questioning and searching for meaning. Looking back at the journeys of Socrates, Seneca, and Confucius, we can easily see that the eternal value lies not in how many texts or famous quotes they left behind, but in the spirit they transmitted to us. It is that spirit that is timeless, that makes their philosophical echoes still move humanity after thousands of years. The first lesson comes from Socrates, the courage to admit, I know nothing. Behind that humility is an attitude of life, against complacency, against the illusion that one has the truth in hand. In modern society, when everyone can speak, share, and debate with just a click of a mouse, this reminder becomes even more necessary. The tragedy of Socrates teaches us that no one has the right to monopolize the truth, and that it is questioning, doubting, and constantly learning that is the path to wisdom. From Seneca, we learn that death is not an enemy, but an inevitable part of life. When we are no longer afraid of death, we truly know how to live. The question Seneca left for posterity is, are you really living or just existing? In today's world, when people are busy chasing fame and fortune and constantly worrying, Stoic philosophy reminds us that the value of life lies not in its length, but in the quality of each moment. Confucius left us a lesson about responsibility to ourselves. The gentleman seeks from himself, the petty man seeks from others. If we want to change the world, we must first change ourselves. This sounds familiar, but few people actually apply it. We often demand that others be fair and kind, while we easily overlook our own shortcomings. That philosophy, despite all the revisions and debates, remains a guiding light. Start with inner training, because only then can social order have a solid foundation. From all three of these people, a common message emerges. The truth may be obscured, the teachings may be lost, but the spirit of philosophy never disappears. We do not need to know exactly what Socrates said, what Seneca wrote, or what Confucius said in his original letter. What matters is to continue their spirit, always asking questions, always bravely facing death and fear, always starting from ourselves when we want to change the world. Perhaps this is the greatest secret of timeless ideas, not to keep the words intact, but to keep that spirit alive in us. And when we let that echo resonate in our own lives, we will truly understand why their philosophy is never old and will never be lost. If you have followed this far, perhaps there is an echo in your heart, the echo of a question, of doubt, or of a newly ignited belief. The three great philosophers that we have just looked back on together did not leave humanity with unchanging dogmas, but left a door that is always open for each generation to enter and find their own answers. And you, between Socrates, Seneca, and Confucius, which one left you with the deepest obsession? Is it the courage to face death, the struggle to live a full life, or the reminder to cultivate yourself before demanding of others? Share your thoughts in the comments section because who knows, your story might become the next echo for others. If you find what we have discovered meaningful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the Echoes of Philosophy channel. Every week, we take you on a new journey where the secrets behind ancient philosophy are illuminated with a modern perspective.